Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com, setting the record straight about climate. This video discusses why claims of Arctic warming are fake news. The Canadian Broadcasting Corporation has a recent article titled, Arctic Climate Warming Higher and Faster Than Expected. A new international report by 90 scientists shows that Arctic temperatures are rising higher and faster than expected, and the effects are already being felt around the world. Among the findings in this year's report, the Arctic Ocean could be largely free of sea ice in the summer as early as 2030 or even before that. That sounds pretty scary. So let's look at that scary prediction of an ice-free Arctic by 2030. Leading experts from Norway predicted in 2008 that the Arctic would be ice-free that summer. That's quite a bit before 2030. Leading experts from the United States and Canada also predicted that the North Pole would be ice-free in 2008. One of these was David Barber of the University of Manitoba. Remember that name? I'll be referring back to him several times. Mark Cerise of the National Snow and Ice Data Center in Boulder, Colorado, also predicted that the North Pole would be ice-free in 2008. NASA's leading expert Jay Zwally predicted the Arctic would be ice-free by 2012. This was reported by Seth Borenstein of the Associated Press. And Mark Cerise said, the Arctic is screaming. Leading experts at the Naval Research Lab predicted that Arctic would be ice-free by 2013. This was reported by the BBC. And Peter Wadhams, Cambridge University's leading expert, said, in the end, it will all melt away quite suddenly. And the naval research people said, you can argue that our projection of 2013 is already too conservative. Nobel laureate Al Gore predicted that the Arctic would be ice-free by 2014. NASA's top climate prophet, Dr. James Hansen, predicted in 2008 that the Arctic would be free of ice in 5 to 10 years. That's between 2013 and 2018. Taking the silliness one step further, President Obama's science advisor John Holdren predicted in 2009 that Arctic winters would become ice-free too. That's pretty amazing considering the Arctic is 30 below zero during the winter. So let's return back to the report which this video is discussing. Remember David Barber? Well, he said one of the most surprising results of the research is that there is now open water even during the winter in the Arctic Ocean. We didn't think we would see that much open water in the winter, he said, adding that it is occurring mostly on the Atlantic side. David Barber's report of open water in the eastern Arctic sounds bad until we look at this report from 1922 and we see that the same thing happened then. The Arctic seems to be warming up. Reports from fishermen, seal hunters, and explorers who sail the seas about Spitsbergen and the eastern Arctic all point to a radical change in climate conditions and hitherto unheard of high temperatures in that part of the Earth's surface. Many old landmarks are so changed as to be unrecognizable. Where formerly great masses of ice were found, there are now often moraines, accumulations of earth and stones. At many points where glaciers formerly extended far into the sea, they have entirely disappeared. And look at this. Last winter, the ocean did not freeze over even on the north coast of Spitsbergen. So how did that compare with last year? Remember from the 1922 Weather Bureau report, which I just read, it said the ice never froze over that winter on the north coast of Spitsbergen. Well, how does that compare with this past winter? Well, there's lots of ice this winter. This is a close-up showing Spitsbergen, and almost the whole island was surrounded by ice. So there's more ice in 2017 than there was 95 years earlier. So this is where the report starts to get really entertaining. They blame the polar vortex, dips in the jet stream, and cold weather in Florida on global warming. That open water may be affecting weather patterns. Increased heat from the open water is rising into the atmosphere, which in turn is causing the polar vortex, also known as the jet stream, to weaken in strength. The jet stream is the line of powerful winds between the cold, dry air of the north and the warm, moist air mass further south. As it weakens, it disintegrates into a series of lobes dipping up and down, carrying cold air south and warm air north. Scientists believe that's the reason why we're seeing unseasonably frigid temperatures in places like Florida and unusually warm weather in the north. So the report blamed the polar vortex and cold in Florida on global warming. But in 1978, they blamed the exact same things on global cooling. It snowed in Miami in 1977, and the New York Times reported in 1978 an international team of specialists has concluded from 8 indices of climate there is no end in sight to the cooling trend of the last 30 years. A gradual increase in the area of the northern circumpolar vortex, the massive flow of frigid air around the Arctic, has been recorded by Doctors Angels and Kirshover. And the United States and Russia were very concerned about the huge increase in Arctic sea ice. So they're blaming exactly the same things now on global warming as were blamed on global cooling 40 years ago this winter. And not only did they blame the polar vortex on global cooling, they blamed every other form of bad weather on it. This is from Time magazine, June 24th, 1974. Scientists have found other indications of global cooling. For one thing, there has been a noticeable expansion of the great belt of dry, high-altitude polar winds, the so-called circumpolar vortex that sweep from west to east around the top of the world. Indeed, it is the widening of this cap of cold air that is the immediate cause of Africa's drought. And then down here, they blame tornadoes on it. The collision of air masses of widely different temperatures and humidity can create violent storms. The Midwest's recent rash of disastrous tornadoes, for example. So, this is the part where I explain why Arctic winter warming is fake news. The graph shows temperatures near the North Pole during the year 2014, which was fairly typical of recent years. It starts on January 1st, and these big red spikes show how temperatures have been spiking well above normal during the winter. This is caused by these big swings in the jet stream. We've been seeing record snow extents in the mid-latitudes in recent years. This is caused by frigid Arctic air plunging into the deep south. But that cold air coming to the south has to be displaced by warm air moving to the poles, which is what causes these big spikes. So now let's look at spring and summer temperatures near the pole. So we can see around the middle of spring, suddenly temperatures have been switching over from above normal to below normal. They've been staying below normal all through the melt season in the summer. So we've been seeing big swings in winter temperature above normal and smaller swings in temperature during the summer when temperatures have been below normal. So how come the winter swings are so much larger than the smaller summer swings? Well, the answer to that question is latent heat. We all know about evaporative cooling, how when water evaporates, it cools down its surroundings. Well, water does the exact opposite when it freezes. We were just talking about warm, humid air coming up from the mid-latitudes up to the North Pole during the winter. When it gets there, it freezes and releases heat. This causes these big swings in temperature during the winter. But during the summer, we get the exact opposite effect. During the winter, we see big swings in temperature with small changes in heat. But in the summer, we get small changes in temperature with large changes in heat. This is because the latent heat of melting and freezing constrains the summer temperatures very close to the freezing mark. So even though we're seeing much smaller changes in temperature, we're probably seeing just as large changes in heat as we saw during the winter time. So the way that NASA and NOAA calculate Arctic temperatures is very misleading. They simply average the anomaly for the entire year. But during the winter, we have these large swings in temperature due to latent heat. And in the summer, we get small swings in temperature due to latent heat. So averaging the winter and summer temperatures together is fake news and fake science. And even more important is the fact that there's only 90 days per year when the Arctic can melt. And consistently, those temperatures have been below normal in recent years. So the melt season has been running below normal temperatures. So when people say that the Arctic is melting due to global warming, it's simply not true. So reviewing all the junk science from the CBC report, which I've covered in this video, they've been predicting an ice-free Arctic every year for as long as everyone can remember, and they've been wrong every year. Their predictions for 2030 will almost certainly be wrong too. The recollections of past Arctic ice are also incorrect. There's more ice this winter than there was in the year 1922. Their claims about the polar vortex are also ridiculous. They blamed cold weather in Florida and the polar vortex on global warming and missing Arctic ice. 40 years ago, the identical things were blamed on global cooling and excess Arctic ice. And finally, their methodology for calculating Arctic temperatures is incorrect because they're not taking into consideration latent heat, which causes large positive swings in winter temperature and small negative swings in summer temperature. You simply can't average temperatures together to get an accurate assessment of what's going on with the heat in the Arctic. Visit Toto on the web at realclimatescience.com. He's been pulling back the curtain on junk science for a long time.